Hey everyone, welcome to Friday, just a regular old Friday. So today I want to talk about a few different things that will come into play in next weekend for daylight savings, which, you know, as moms, we all cringe when we hear that because it just means some disruption in sleep. So before I get to daylight savings, I just want to talk a little bit about bedtime routine and bedtime consistency. So there's actually this fascinating research that from the time babies are little, if they are brought into the same space for bedtime, it's consistent and it's calm, it becomes familiar, and their brain starts to regulate their hormones based on all of that and starts to send the melatonin to the body to say, okay, it's time to calm down, it's time to get ready for bed. And that happens really early with really little newborns. So I say that because what this shows us is that it's really important to have the same consistent space for bedtime, starting from about 2 months. Just having the same place where they do their bedtime routine and the sleep takes place. So if that's in parents' room, that's in parents' room. If that's in their own room, that's in their own room. This about 2 months is a good time to start making sure that they do have the same consistent sleep space. So if until then you sort of were playing ring around the room to figure out where your child should sleep, around 2 months you should start figuring out the consistent sleep space. And it should be dark, so blackout curtains are great, or just regular pull blinds and then curtains. White noise is great. It's just helpful for being, it's calming and soothing, and for blocking out any background noise. Also try to think of the environment. Are the colors really bright? Is there so much stimulating stuff on the walls? It doesn't actually matter for every kid, but some kids do react to that. So you just want it to be a consistent sleep space that's pretty calming and has the same things. And you will notice that once you start to bring your child into that room, not that they, like infants might not even show that they're getting calmer, and certainly children might still be revved up from, you know, transitioning to bedtime, but it's happening. It's happening in their brains. So from 2 months on, start establishing a consistent sleep space, and that will send the chemicals to the brain that, okay, I've got this. It's time to calm down. I know what's happening. And then try to pick 2 or 3 things that anybody can do for a bedtime. So obviously for nursing moms, it's not going to be nursing, but you can do rocking in the same chair. You can do reading books or singing songs. I have families that like to say prayers together, or you can even do some playtime on the floor. It's actually okay to have, it doesn't have to be go right in and go right to bed, but you know, start with a bath. Bring them in, do pajamas, maybe some lotion, maybe some baby massage. And then it's okay to have a little quiet, calm play on the floor too. We want bedtime to be about 25 to 30 minutes for children 6 months and up. So if they're under 6 months, you're obviously not going to get a whole half hour, including bath, but you will get close to it even around 5 months. And so starting at 2 months again, having a bedtime routine, having a consistent space. Now for a 2-month-old or 3-month-old, bedtime routine is going to look really different. It might mean a bath every other night or once a week. But the bottom line is, once you get them into that room, start to have a few things that are predictable that anybody can do. And that means pajamas, lotion, books, quiet playtime on the floor. We even bring my 6 and 2-year-old together and to start bedtime in the same room. They like to get dressed in their pajamas together after the tub, and then we separate them. And we each tag team or put the little one down first and then go to the older one. So bedtime space is that's consistent is super important, and bedtime routine that is consistent is super important. Now, does it mean you can't do things out of order? No, you can do some things out of order, but it's better to do things in the same order so that they get used to that order and it becomes predictable because all of that is sending the melatonin, sending messages to release the melatonin. So I want to talk about feeding during bedtimes because this comes up all the time. It is 100% okay to have feeding as part of your bedtime routine, even nursing. In fact, as a lactation counselor, I encourage it. Feeding is great for bonding. It's great for that nurture and holding. They're breathing in your scent. Their bodies are getting regulated to yours as they're little infants. So that's totally okay. And until they're about 3, 4, 5 months, it's absolutely even okay if they start to fall asleep feeding. I know that people get really worried about this, but you can't create any bad habits really while they're that little. Anything that happens can be unlearned. And so I try to tell parents not to stress too much about falling asleep while feeding. But you do want to start to practice that skill so that they learn how to fall asleep without feeding. So that means that trying to do maybe bottle with the lights on or nursing with the lights on, or if your back's okay, if you can handle it, just sit on the floor and feed them with the lights on, and then get into the chair and read books, and then turn off the light and sing songs and rock, so that it's still part of the routine. It's just not the last thing they're doing, so they're not associating the actually falling asleep with nursing or feeding. Okay, so we talked about bedtime space, we talked about bedtime consistency, we talked about bedtime routine. Let's talk about bedtime timing. So bedtime timing is also really key because if they're overtired, their brain sends another burst of adrenaline because they're like, oh, it's not bedtime. This kid needs to stay up. It happens to us too. It's called a second wind. But when we see it with our kids, with babies, they become fussy, or, you can tell they're overtired. They're just like not having anything. They might even refuse feeding or being held because their body is so dysregulated that now it's going to even take twice as much to get them regulated. So really looking for sleepy cues and figuring out when the right time for bedtime is. With older kids, the second wind comes in, like they might be running around, or they might just refuse to go to sleep. They might not even be fussing. It just takes them a lot longer to fall asleep. So we have bedtime space, bedtime routine, bedtime time, and now let's talk about the big one, daylight savings. So when we fall back next week, that actually means that we are going to be pushing our kids to stay up an hour later. And that is the advice. The recommendation to get your kids back on track as soon as possible is to keep their bedtime the same by the clock. Not by their body clock, but by the clock on your wall. So if they were going to bed at 7 or 7:30 before daylight savings, then you keep their bedtime at 7 or 7:30 after daylight savings. So for some kids, that might be really hard to push them an hour. And so then you can break it up into increments and do it 2 nights, push them a half hour each night. The other thing about that is you really want to then start changing their whole routine to be on that time. So you want to make sure you're waking them up earlier than you might want to. So I wouldn't let them sleep past 6 for those first couple days, because that will really help to reset them. And so I know our instinct is to let them sleep as late as possible when we fall back, but it's better to get them on the right routine, to wake them up between 6 and 6:30, just so that their naps and everything else can be consistent. If your child is regularly sleeping till 7, then wake them up at 7. But I would not let your child sleep till 8 that day or sleep extended because they went to bed later. You really want to try to wake them up at their regular wake up time and get them back on track. So meal times are adjusted, nap times are adjusted, and then you can swing right back into bedtime that second night. Okay, this was a lot of information. You guys are watching live, that's great. And if you are watching in replay, you can press replay and ask any questions. I see one comment. Son's pediatrician said not to feed him at night anymore. Yeah, no, it's totally fine to feed your baby during bedtime routine, just not the second before they go to bed. Okay. You guys can find out more information about what I do at raisinglittles.org. I do one-on-one coaching, and I love what I do. So if you have any questions, you can type them in. I'll be responding to them all day or whenever you type them. And if you ever want to schedule a free info call. They're always free, just to get a little bit of information about how I work or any ideas and things that you might have about a specific problem. But thanks for joining in, and good luck next weekend. It'll be fun for all of us.